Hey folks, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to share with you techniques that I use to go ahead and make mechanized worlds and sci-fi looking structures. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'll make a brand new canvas. And this canvas is going to be 5100 pixels wide by 3300 pixels tall and 600 pixels per inch. So let's go ahead and click create to get started. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a brand new layer. If we hold down the Shift, Option, Command, N key, and I'm all about keyboard shortcuts. If we do that, it automatically makes a new layer. You can also click the new layer icon down below, but I like to use keyboard shortcuts because it makes my workflow even faster. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'll pick a color that is not black here. I like to work in red. And I will go ahead and create some type of a structure here. And I'm going to just model this off of, some kind of a chess piece here. I'll make a rectangular structure. Maybe it's got some curvature at the top. Really, you can make it whatever you want. I'm just kind of riffing off of something that immediately comes to my mind. So I've got all my gaps closed. And what we'll do now is we'll just move this down below. And we'll use our keyboard shortcut, Option, Command, T. And I'm on a Mac here, so I'm using Mac keyboard shortcuts, but every time I'm saying Option, it's Alt. Every time I say Command, it's Control. And so what I'll do now is, this brings up a bounding box with a pivot point, and I'm going to just move this pivot point up and out of the way. And the transform tool is still active. So what I want to do next is I want to rotate this copy over. I want to rotate this just to keep the math simple. I'm going to make sure that the rotation is going to be set to -60. So I'll hit enter for -60 and I'll hit enter to confirm my change. So I've got my first copy. The next thing I want to do is I want to replicate that copy so I have an additional 4 copies of this chess piece. So if I hold down the Shift, Option, Command, T key, I'm able to get the copies to go around that rotation. So the math is kind of important because there's 360 degrees in the circle. 360 divided by 60 gives us 6 copies. And so that's what I've got to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and merge what I've got, and I will just bring this in. I will transform it so you can see the whole structure. Now, what I've just done here, you can use if you're making spokes or customized wheels for a car. This is a great technique for that. You can get the results fairly quickly and really accurately. But what I'm doing here is I'm going to make some kind of a mechanized world, and I'm going to have some kind of a ship that's maybe hovering above this world. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to hit the transform tool. I'm going to add some perspective. I'm going to right click, choose perspective. I'll bring the bottom end in. I'll bring the top end out. And of course, you can make this as exaggerated as you want. This kind of makes this structure look really massive and really, really big. So I like that. I'm going to go with that. And next, what I'd like to do is I'm going to just make this a solid structure. So I'll just, on a separate layer here, I'll just go ahead and make some connections to give this thing some form. Trying to make sure that all my gaps are closed. I probably did not do that, but whatever the case may be, I will come back and try to do my best to make sure all the gaps are closed. All right, so I've got all the gaps closed. And what I'll do now is I want to just fill in these areas, the thickness, with a darker value. And what that does is it really makes this structure look really, really solid. It kind of gives a little bit of visual weight to the structure, which I think makes this look even more imposing. And what we can do now is we can go ahead and I'm going to just make a set of crosshairs because I'm going to define an opening. I'm putting this on its own layer. I'll just draw a set of lines like this. This is just going to be a guide for me. I'll make a new layer above it, and I'll just draw an oval, and then I'll just reposition that oval and then get rid of my guide. And so this is going to have some thickness. So this is like where I guess all the ships or the aliens or whatever come out of. Your mileage may vary. So I've got this really neat looking structure. Details, go nuts with it. Think about the material. Think about like maybe this is made out of stone. So I might just go ahead and throw a couple of dots here just to kind of give a sense of, what is this object made of? These things right here, these little elements right here might actually be openings, for ships to come crawling out of. You could really have some fun with this. So I'll just fill that in. Again, your mileage may vary on this. So what I want to do now is I can merge all of these layers together. And I want to actually have, a setup where I'm kind of looking at a planet underneath. So I'll make a new layer underneath and I'll just draw a straight line. So this is going to involve using something called rectangular to polar coordinates. It's a filter that's in Photoshop that's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do here is I'll just draw this straight line and I'll go up to filter, I'll go to distort, I'll go to polar coordinates, and you're not going to be able to necessarily see this in the zoom because it is tiny. It's barely visible on my screen here, but I'm going to click OK to show you what it does. What it does is it takes that straight line and turns it into a circle or an oval. And I can now hit the Command T key. I can go ahead and scale it up and move this planet, underneath. If I want to make it wider, I can just hold down the Shift key to constrain it only on the X-axis. And then what I'll do is I'll just use the paint bucket tool and fill that in. And to make this look like some kind of a interesting, intriguing planet, I can use my brush tool. I'll just come up with some really weird shapes. Again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. Just have some fun with it. And I'll just fill those in. And in order to give this some dimension, because it still looks somewhat flat, what really helps is coming back in and adding some elements of lighter value. So by just cutting out some shapes, I'll just pick some ovals. I'll have some squares. I'm kind of inferring a little bit of perspective, even though it's not exactly accurate perspective. It's, hopefully believable enough. And I can just create some lines and some other forms that will just suggest that this is not just a flat world, but there's actually, some other constituent shapes. So now I've got something that looks like that. So that rectangular to polar coordinate thing is pretty darn cool. And so now that I have this, I can break these shapes up by adding some maybe spikes, antennas, wires, other things that just kind of suggest that, there's some rhythm to this world. It's not just a bunch of flat shapes. And of course, you can always go back in and add some texture. Dots are the quickest and fastest textures that you can add. So now that I've got all of this stuff set up here, let's make a new layer above that. And we're going to use this rectangular to polar coordinate to make it look like we're actually viewing everything through the lens of some kind of a portal, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'll just hide the existing layers that I have on this blank layer that I've just created here. I will use my rectangular selection tool and I will fill it in with Option Delete. And then I will come back in and with that same rectangular selection tool, I'll just make a series of, random rectangles. I'm holding down the Shift key to make multiple selections on that rectangle, and I'll hit Command X to hit cut. And that just carves out those shapes. So I'll use that rectangular to polar coordinate filter here. Again, go to distort, polar coordinates, and then let's see if we can actually see a preview of what this is going to look like. Maybe not, but in case. That's what we have. It makes it kind of look like more of like a sci-fi type of ring, which is kind of neat. Now I can bring back the other two elements that I have. I can see a little bit of the planet, and I can see a little bit of the ship that's up in the horizon. And I'll make this a little bit more obvious so that you can see the layers clearly. On the layer that contains the portal, I'm just going to make that black. And then you can now see the ship and you can see the planet. I've put these on separate layers to make it easier for me to adjust, right? I want to maybe have more of that planet visible. So I'm just going to move it up, and putting things on different layers gives me that flexibility to do that. Now I want to trim off these areas that are not going to be seen, like these rings are part of another ship. So anything that is not in that ring, I want it to be invisible. So let me just temporarily hide the other two layers. I'm going to use my magic wand tool. You want to make sure your magic wand tool is set to sample all layers and that tolerance is set to a relatively high value. And I'm going to click on each of these rectangles, holding down the shift key to add to my selection. Now what I can do is I can turn on the planet layer, and I can hit Command X to cut that. So you can see that right here, cut. And then up above, I need to get rid of a little bit of the ship. Command X cuts. So now I've got this portal and I'm looking at this planet. I can now come back in and make this ship a little bit darker. I'm not going to make it black. I'll just make it kind of maybe bluish. And this planet down below, we'll do the same thing. And so it has like more of this kind of mechanized world type of feel. And then of course I can now color things in, and I can, you know, experiment. Maybe I might have some wires that are, you know, coming down to the planet. Maybe it's kind of tethered, which is kind of neat. And you can add some other ships that are in the foreground. Just go ahead and have a ship. Kind of moving in. You know, those are all elements that I think will give your objects a sense of scale. So if I have this ship, maybe I'll just make it super duper tiny. That just makes this structure look really, really massive. So that's the extent of the technique. There's a lot to unpack here. We're using that radial polar to rectangular coordinate tool. We're using the radial transform, which is pretty useful. A lot of really neat stuff to unpack. Let me know if you have any questions. As always, I appreciate the likes and the subscribes. As of this video, we've got about roughly 559 subscribers. Thank you all for subscribing to the videos. I hope that you're getting some value out of what I'm showing you here. There's plenty more to come. And I'm also open to getting your feedback in terms of what you would like me to go ahead and demo next on the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.